Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chats with Jason. And I'm so excited about today's show. We'll deep dive into why employee experience has such a big impact on the customer experience and ultimately profitability. We'll explore some of the concepts that are in the book House of the Customer, a blueprint for one to one, customer first, employee driven business transformation. Its author, Greg Kihlström, joins me today. He is also the principal at GK5A and the host of the Agile Brand podcast. So, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Well, Greg, it is so great to have you on the show today, sharing your insights as a customer experience and business professional. Congratulations on your latest book, House of the Customer, a blueprint for one-to-one, customer-first, employee-driven business transformation. Greg, can you share with the audience a little bit about your new book?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, thanks so much for having me today. Looking forward to this. So my latest book is called House of the Customer, as you mentioned. What it is I've spent the past several years working with a few different types of companies and all mostly in the enterprise space. But um, I found that everyone is bought into the premise that customer experience is really important and personalization builds onto the existing customer experience. But not a lot of organizations, even very large ones, really know how to put all of the pieces together that really create an omni-channel personalized customer experience. There's lots of reasons for this, and we can certainly talk about some of them. But everything from data disconnects to process disconnects to different departments or product lines or business units not communicating well with one another. And so what I wanted to do with the book was just put together a blueprint of here are all of the different pieces that go together to create this house of the customer, I call, which is really this customer centric organization that is really looking at everything in terms of how do we serve customers as well as possible. And I use the metaphor of the house, with the roof and the foundation and the walls and the columns and all of that. It's just as an easy metaphor to not only explain everything, but also for people to understand. Okay, there may be a few of these elements that we're actually doing really well. Most organizations are doing some of them, if not most of them, really well, but there are other areas that really need some improvement and some focus. And so kind of teases apart all those different aspects so people can focus on what really matters.
Yeah, I can remember at business school talking about the strategy house, and customer was just a pillar of that. I love what you've done here, where you've made the entire house around building those foundations for a sustainable customer experience. Before we dig deeper into the book, and there's some great insights that I'm hoping you'll be able to share with us, I was wondering if you could define the relationship in your terms between the customer experience and the employee experience.
Yeah, I think this is something that is so critical because a brand that focuses solely on the customer and doesn't take into account what the experience of its own employees is like, they're going to have some issues if not in the immediate term, they're going to have some issues in the long term. Because what we see is with high employee turnover, with lack of empowered employees that feel like they can be creative and be innovative, you're going to see, even if a big investment is made in creating a good customer experience, it's not going to be sustained. It may be good for a year, it may be good for months or something like that, but there's going to be turnover because there's a terrible employee experience. And in addition to that, the customers themselves, when they interact, they're not just, there's a lot of digital interactions these days, but they're not only interacting with a website or with social media. In so many industries, the customers are interacting with frontline employees or at least with human employees. And so when they see people that are disengaged and either uninformed or not really interested in being informed in what they do, that reflects on the customer experience as well, and that affects customer loyalty and lifetime value as well.
Mm. So you mentioned companies spending a lot of money, sometimes a lot of money to try and deliver a program that ultimately doesn't succeed. I have a viewpoint here that you actually don't need to spend a lot of money to start improving the experience. You need to get absolutely crystal clear, first and foremost, around what the experience needs to look like, feel like, be, and then help people in the organization understand that. But what's your take? Do you think everything needs to start with a big budget, or can people get started in a simpler way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of just agile principles and some of the processes and methodologies that come from agile. And so therefore, yes, start small, iterate. You don't know everything. You can't know everything to start, and so therefore you shouldn't create some big initiative. I mean, a lot of times these the something like three-quarters of digital transformations fail because they scope things so big and they over engineer and they overthink things without getting real data. Same with customer experience initiatives, which are often tied up in those digital transformations. But it's so important that you start small and just get as much learning as you can and then spread out. It also makes sense. I mean, again, I work with a lot of enterprise customers and they simply can't, in order to roll something out company wide, it takes so long and so many stakeholders and so many silos broken down and all that. It would take months, if not years, to roll something out completely enterprise wide. It just makes so much more sense to start where you can, learn, build, be scientific about it, of course, and build in tests that are measurable and hypotheses that are falsifiable and all that good stuff. But start small and then iterate from there, and then other teams can take what you've done and what you've learned and apply it to their teams as well, and then you start connecting these dots together.
Mm, mm. I love it. It's also much better to fail after just a couple of days of trying something as opposed to spending years building a perfect solution and then it fail. So
Right.
I'm absolutely with you there on that agile approach to improving the experiences and helping companies break through. Enterprise companies are not nimble, unlike some of our small businesses out there. And so they do need that iterative approach that you talk about. So really appreciate that. Now, in the book, there's three parts. The second part is all about the house of the customer, and you talk about five pillars. Do you mind sharing those five pillars with the audience?
Yeah, sure. So over everything, the roof, so to speak, over everything is the processes and systems that they protect us when we don't necessarily know what to do. And I work a lot on the operational side of these things as well. So those things are there to guide us, and when we don't have the answers, the foundation is the employee is the customer centric culture of the organization. That's where the employee experience comes into play, and I call it an agile customer centric culture because it does need to be nimble and be able to adapt, and employees need to be empowered to experiment and fail, and certainly that's a big component of successful companies, is leaders being okay with their team members failing and learning from those failures, and there really isn't such a thing as failure if you do learn, in my opinion. And then we've got the three pillars, or in that hold up our our house in the middle, which are really all about the customer. And so that's listening, understanding, and serving the customer. So we collect data and understand our customers. We then serve those customers personalized experiences and content offers, experience, all of those kinds of things, and then we listen to, well, what are they doing, and create this feedback loop. And then on either side, really the walls of the house, so to speak, are the business goals on the one side, and then the business outcomes. Those really frame, because at the end of the day, while the customer needs to be in the center of everything, a for-profit business, does need to achieve its goals, and it has stakeholders that it's beholden to. So, really taking all of these things into account means that we're not dropping the ball on anything. We're taking care of the business. The business is profitable and successful. the customers are happy and satisfied, and they're served with what they want, and employees are taken care of as well. So it's kind of that win-win-win.
Yeah, I appreciate the call out there about delivering on the commercial side of the business. I think it's really easy for experienced professionals who sometimes get lost in the work and forget about the reality, the hard reality that whether you're a not-for-profit or a for-profit business, you still need that income, that surplus, that revenue, the profit to continue to drive the business forward, and of course to achieve the things that you want to achieve. So I absolutely love that you wrap the house of customer up with, at that foundation, the customer-centric culture, and then at the top with the processes and systems to really balance out that it does take the entire pie and not just a singular focus to deliver that breakthrough that we all desire in our businesses. Now, I know a lot of people struggle with culture in their organizations. In fact, I would say 90% of the companies that I get to do some work with, especially the mid-sized enterprises, where they've been started by their founder and they've grown up and perhaps outgrown that startup culture, and then they just get a little bit lost and they find culture really hard because they can't touch it, but they can feel it. Do you have some tips and hints for our audience around how to build that customer-centric culture that you talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that you touched on is just how culture evolves over time, and there's a framework, and I didn't come up with the framework, but I rely on it a lot, because I think it gives an interesting view into things, and it's called the competing values framework, and the one of the premises of it is that there is no one single culture that any company should have, and even comparing one company to another, but also a company to itself. It really depends on the point in time that you're at. And so just very briefly, you can look at it in terms of a quadrant where, at the very top, there's the community and the collaboration, and there's the innovation. And then at the bottom, there's the processes and the systems, kind of the hierarchy of things, as well as the sales and market driven aspect of culture. And so to use the analogy of the startup, when you're a startup, you're a small team, probably very, a tribe of people that's very passionate and committed. You're also very innovative. So you're at the very top of that quadrant. As time goes on, you kind of drop down and you got to make some sales. And so therefore you need to be market focused and sell some products, or else the lights are going to go off. And you also need to have a lot more process, and you need to be a lot more process oriented. And so it's almost like gravity takes hold as time goes on. And that's okay that it does that. But you need to be aware that there needs to be some elements of all four of those areas, no matter whether you're a startup or whether you're a couple decades into your experience as an organization. And so a lot of those companies that are sort of at that mid stage, they're a little bit of each, but maybe in the wrong combination. And they're not, again, there's no one right answer. And this is all, the premise is that there isn't one size fits all, but that it takes all of these in different combinations over time. And so being nimble, being agile, whether that's big A agile using Scrum and Safe and things like that, or just nimble agile, that's required, because leaders and execs at companies need to understand, okay, you know what, we're doing great, we're cohesive as a team, but man, we got to sell some more stuff, or else, again, we're not going to meet our targets. And so we need to make this shift and not lose our culture, but just make a shift in one direction or the other. So long way of saying, it's a constantly evolving kind of mix of things.
So there's many ways that you can measure customer experience or the customer's transactions, whether it be customer satisfaction or touchpoint survey or NPS or CSAT or customer effort score. It's probably do a whole show for hours just on the list, let alone defining them. How do you measure culture, though? How do you know that you're achieving the culture you're trying to?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can measure it in similar ways to customer, customer engagement, customer experience. And what I would say is, um, with both, there are, there's leading indicators, there's lagging indicators. I mean, the
Mhm.
lagging indicators, like the survey results and everything, they're very beneficial, particularly as relative measures over time. They're less beneficial as a real time measure of things, simply because they're after the fact and lagging. It requires both to measure that. And so, if we're talking about employee experience, we need to measure some type of employee, whether it's employee NPS or employee satisfaction or things. But also, we need to have more real time quantitative measures of what's actually going on in the business, how engaged, how productive, all of those types of things, are our employees. And when possible, there are ways to measure motivation, even, and other types of things, and we can get creative on that. And there's tools to measure like team cohesion and things. It can really vary depending on the industry and the makeup of the teams, but I think it's nice to have one metric that is just sort of the go-to of like, okay, our NPS is up or down, but that rarely tells the full story. So I always like to have
Mhm.
at least a few things to look at them over time, see the dips and the spikes, and again, not just have a snapshot, because it's hard to see that. But it takes several things really going on over time to really get a full picture.
Mm. Well, when you're looking at the financial health of an organization, you don't just look at the profit, you look at, some key indicators within those numbers, right? So not surprising that it's no different for employee or customer experience for that matter. Now, I have a couple of questions that I'd love to get to, but before we do so, how about you share with the audience, Greg, details about your podcast?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah. So I have a podcast called The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlström. We are in year 5, so almost in our 6th year here, 400 episodes. So I talk with a combination of business, so enterprise leaders, as well as marketing, technology, and customer experience platform leaders and innovators, and really talk about, try to get practical with it, and talk about what does it take to create a great customer experience? What does it take to do measurement well? AI is certainly, something that's in the conversation a lot these days, but really, not just AI as hype, but how do we actually do better work, reach customers better, and create greater customer lifetime value?
So you mentioned that favorite acronym of everyone these days, AI. How can we use AI to improve the customer and employee experience?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things where AI gets a lot of oxygen these days, in conversations, and I think there of the things that have been hyped in years of late, I would say it's actually one that warrants at least some of that hype. I certainly, there are some things that maybe have a few years yet um, to really get practical. But they're one of the great things about AI is that it augments what humans are able to do. I think in terms of thinking about AI replacing jobs, yes, that will happen, and it has happened to some degree. But the exciting part for me is how it's going to help us do our jobs better and help humans focus on what humans do better, which is being creative, tying abstract concepts together to create strategies, versus AI and machines. They process a lot of data very well and get insights out of data that a human could never do, and themselves probably ever, if not taking a lot of time to do. And so, AI can help by looking through vast amounts of data and starting to see trends. And okay, our customers keep asking for this, or they keep saying that, or helping us create more personalized content and generating that. It takes a lot of time and effort to create multiple variations of anything. Once you start getting to the one-to-one personalization, we're not most organizations, if not all organizations, are not quite there, like one-to-one omni-channel. personalizing everything, but generative AI and other AI tools are able to help us personalize things a lot more easily. And we know from seeing statistics that when something is more relevant and more personalized to someone, they're going to respond to it better and likely stay more loyal and things like that. And so AI can help in all those ways. I think there's many other ways where, predictive analytics is another area of AI, which is really exciting to me. Figuring out what is the next best action or offer or experience for a customer, and really anticipating, not just reacting to and personalizing something based on what happened, but looking at behavior and saying, okay, you know what, Greg did this, this, and this. He must be in the market for that. And we would love to sell someone this one product, but they're really taking the actions that make it seem like they would benefit from this other product. So let's do that. We make money either way. As long as we're selling both products, let's push someone to the thing that's going to benefit them the most. And sure enough, they're gonna reward us when we do that.
Yeah, I think there's some real interesting things being done right now with AI in terms of that predictability, helping organizations meet the customer in the conversation at the right point, as opposed to what so many organizations do and just spray a message to heaps of people, hoping that it hits enough people at the right time. And the other part that you touched on was just the analytics piece. Quite often, organizations will put out a survey, they'll get the results back, and they go, oh, I should have asked this question, or I should have done this. And of course, with the use of AI, can't necessarily get it perfect, but you can get deeper insight into some of those what ifs than you possibly could do just with a team and not the right questions being asked, right? So certainly interesting times in the industry, and that AI tool is there to help. Now, I'm wondering, do you have a memory of the best customer experience that you ever had, and what made it the best?
Wow, yeah, that's a good one. I without without a specific example, I guess, the general the general thing is, I'm very loyal to a few companies that I
Hmm.
use, whether it's I travel a lot, and so I'm very loyal to, to a hotel company, airline, stuff like that. And
Hmm.
where the reason I'm loyal is because I consistently get what I need, and they're thinking one
Hmm.
step ahead of me. When they don't, and I've switched brands before because I kept being like, listen, I keep asking for the same thing, and it's like I have to say it the first time every time. When I go into a hotel, I like to stay on a floor that's high off the ground or whatever. Like, why do I have to keep telling you that versus when
Hmm.
I walk in, I don't even ask for that anymore. I know it's going to be delivered. So, it's that anticipating what I want and need, and delivering that. So, that's I think that there's a few examples where that consistently happens. And when it doesn't happen, I'll give a brand one or two tries maybe, and then I'll move on and find somebody else, because the technology is there. I know because I work on that side of things. I know it's available. I know my preferences are in a database somewhere. Just why can't you connect the dots? So, and I've moved banks for that reason too. The classic example is, you call up the bank and you have to give your account number 10 times. I would say to name names, I guess, I'm a big Amex customer because um, I've even been an early adopter of some of their products, which were not quite 100% ready for prime time, but I was an early adopter of them. And they respond to what I have an experience, and I say, hey, like, it would be really nice if you did XYZ. And you know what? 30, 60 days later, that feature is in the product. Like, that's really amazing
Hmm.
to have that kind of feedback and listening to your customers. Again, not everything that I say gets implemented, of course, but it's great to know that someone is actually listening, not just some chatbot somewhere, and it goes into the
Hmm.
ether, right?
Yeah, I think that is important. So often companies ask for user feedback, customer feedback, and they don't necessarily close the loop on what happens with that feedback. I'm not suggesting you have to go back and say one on one to each person, you said X and we did Y, but how can you go back to those that you did get feedback from and say, this is the result of your collective feedback, which may include your specific recommendation, or it may not, but at least it closes that loop and creates that deeper relationship. And what I heard from you there was not your airline's loyalty program or your hotel brand of choice loyalty program. You talked about consistency, a trusted experience. You trusted that they're going to get it right more than not. And when they don't get it right, it's such an unusual thing that you can move on from it.
Well, and they made up for it when they didn't as well. And that was the other thing. It's like, it took a different bank that I won't name. It took me giving them a 1, on the net promoter score for them to call me with an issue. Like that's the only time I've actually gotten a call from that bank regarding a transaction, and I've given them feedback. And yet, here again, I moved to a different company and I chat with them, and I get almost immediate response to my request for a feature. So it's night and day.
Yeah, being listened to and valued as a customer. So, of course, your book, your new book, House of the Customer, is available everywhere great books are sold. In the show notes, there will be a link to the Amazon listing of the book. Before we do wrap up today, Greg, what's one thing our audience members could start doing virtually straight away to improve the experiences that they deliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'd recommend is just start looking at looking at the feedback that your customers are giving, and make one priority to start with, and don't try to boil the ocean, don't try to do everything. Pick one priority that's going to make a meaningful impact on your customers. Create a test around that, and just get it just get it done. And don't overthink it, but make it something that's small enough to get done quickly, but meaningful enough to have an impact and to help your team learn. And just start by doing that. And when you do that, and you do that kind of thing over and over again, you're going to have a culture of experimentation and learning, and it will help so much in the long run.
I love that. Just start working on one meaningful piece of work that will make a difference to your customers or your employees, and of course, experiment. You don't have to have all the answers at the beginning, but you do need to listen and act on that feedback. Greg, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. We will share all of your social media contact details in the show notes for our listeners that want to follow your great work. But before we leave, any closing remarks?
No, just thanks so much for having me here. Really enjoyed talking about this, and yeah, it's while I wrote a book about the entire scope of creating great experiences, it can start small, and it can start where you are, and with your team, and one thing at a time. So really look forward to getting feedback. I'd love to get feedback from anybody who reads the book, and I always try to learn from feedback as well. So thanks again.
Fantastic. Thanks, Greg, and thanks to everyone who's listened or shared this episode.